I've been married. It's going to be 21 years in April. And for all you guys out there, I just want to say I'm sorry because I found the most beautiful woman in the whole wide world. I had to go to Chicago to find her. But she's the most beautiful woman in the whole wide world. I don't know, she's right there by the door. That's my wife, Cecilia. And it's a fact that she's the most beautiful woman in the whole wide world because I have the best taste in the whole wide world. So that makes her the most beautiful. But I asked her this morning, I was like, hey, we've been married almost 21 years, dated a year, and engaged about 6 months. So it's been about 23 years since we've been in a relationship. And I was like, hey, do you know my most secret obsession? I asked her this morning. She's going through everything. She's like, video games? I'm like, babe, I play video games like once a month. That's not my most secret, it's an obsession, my secret obsession. I want to confess it to everybody today. My most secret obsession. She's going through stuff like, cheesecake. I have to eat cheesecake for breakfast, lunch, and dinner 7 days a week. It's a secret obsession. But, so we're going through, I'm like, no, babe, remember when we were dating? I mean, 23 years, even when we were dating, I would tell you my most secret obsession. I have a secret obsession with death. I'm gonna die. And when we were dating, right, I'm like, babe, I didn't even kiss her until the day we got married. Because I was like, babe, what if I die? Like, I don't even know for sure I'm gonna marry you. I mean, I'm engaged, I bought the ring, but it's not for sure until we say I do. And what if I die and you end up marrying somebody else? And then you have to tell them, there's this dude named Dwayne, we were engaged, and I'm like, I don't want anything for you to whoever you end up marrying, because I might die. It wasn't real romantic, right? I'm not real romantic, but you get what you got, right? But I would tell her, what if I die? I don't want to, do anything with you that you would have to tell somebody else is what we did. And so we were very strict with ourselves. But number two, I was like, man, when I die, I want to see Jesus. And it's like, man, I don't want to be like, hey, I'm driving home at 3 in the morning, come from your house, and get in a car accident. Man, I just see Jesus. Oh man. You see, my most secret obsession is what I really strive for every day of my life, every month of my year, every year of my decade, every decade of my life. My most secret obsession, I wake up every morning, what I'm obsessed with isn't just death, but I'm going to cross a finish line. When I cross this finish line, I'm going to break through, and I'm going to see Jesus face to face. And I'm driven every day of my life to hear these words. Well done, my good and faithful servant. That's what I want to hear from my Savior because I love him. And I want my life to be a fragrance pleasing to him. And when I cross out, I might be beat up, battered, barely making it across it's a marathon. I might make it through that finish line just barely standing. Giving every ounce, every drop poured out for Jesus. I want to give it all because I love him and I want to hear, well done, good and faithful servant. So that leads to the question, I'm going to hear well done, good and faithful servant. What's the measuring of whether you hear well done? Or hey, you get a C. If you ever took a class, whether it's high school, whether it's college, whatever, even if you hire somebody, you want clear expectations. You love those teachers, here's the syllabus, here's the grading curve, there's no grading curve, there's a grading curve. Here, this test is going to count for 30% of your final grade. This is very important in this test. And when they give you that clear expectation of what is going to be measured, whether you were a success in that class or not, I love it when they make it clear, right? And so Jesus, he made it clear for us. It's really not that complicated. If you're to summarize, obviously, it's famous, the great commandment is to love God with all your heart and soul, mind and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself, right? If I love God, and I love my neighbor, wow. But how I know if I'm really loving God and if I'm really loving my neighbor? There's a third one in there, and it's make disciples. Make disciples. You see, I am a disciple. But I want to be a disciple that makes disciples. That makes disciples. That makes disciples until Jesus comes. So, my identity first is I'm a disciple. I follow Jesus. But he's made clear expectations of what he expects from us here on earth. We got to make disciples. We got to be a disciple that makes disciples, and the people we're discipling, they need to make disciples until Jesus comes. And so, in your table, there's like these cards that has some notes that'll help you a little bit. Start with the end in mind. Start with the end in mind. Turn to your neighbor and say, start with the end in mind. Start with the end. Like, if we have a finish line, right? The end of your life. What are you going to hear when you see Jesus face to face? He's going to be like, hey, yeah, you did a lot of great things for the community. Yeah, you were a good parent. But for you to hear, well done, good and faithful servant, did you love God, love others, and make disciples?
Yeah.
Did you fulfill what he asked us to do? He made it clear and he repeated it several times. So, many of you, this is review, right? Before you can move on to algebra 2, you need algebra 1, right? So review. The day Jesus rose from the dead, he first appeared to some women. He said, hey, go tell my disciples I'm alive. That night, the first night, Easter Sunday night, he appears in a room. 11 of his disciples, or 10 of his disciples are there. Judas hung himself, and Thomas is missing in action somewhere, right? And so there's 10 guys and maybe some other people in the room, and Jesus appears in the room. Go ahead and touch me. I'm alive. And in that room on Sunday night, the first thing he's like, as the Father sent me, I'm sending you. Like just how the Father sent me, now I'm sending you. John 20, look it up. As the Father sent me, I'm sending you. And then, guess what? A whole week they're in Jerusalem. He's like, I want to meet you guys in Galilee, up by the Sea of Galilee. But I don't know, the whole week they're there. Because the next Sunday night, guess who's there? They're in the room still. And Thomas shows up. And Jesus appears in the room. And Thomas had just said, like, I won't believe it until I touch his scars myself. I don't know, you guys are all going crazy and nuts. He did everybody something that I gotta touch him. He's like, Thomas, go ahead and touch my side, touch my scars. So then they go up. That's in Jerusalem. It's up in a mountain in the center of Israel. And he's like, go back to the north, to Galilee. Like I told the ladies when I first appeared to them, I'm going to meet you guys in Galilee. We're in Jerusalem here. He had told them on that first night. In John it says, as the Father sending me, I'm sending you. In Luke he says, hey, the repentance for the forgiveness of sins has to be preached to all nations. That was in the upper room the first night. But then they go up to Galilee. I don't know which happened first. Maybe it was by the Sea of Galilee. First, that Jesus appeared to his disciples one morning when they're out on the boat. There's 7 of them, not all 10, not all 11, but 7 of them are out fishing. And then Jesus about to show, hey, throw the net over on the other side. You poor fishermen didn't catch nothing all night. And then, he said it like that. He was much more nicer than me. So, anyways, they throw the net over. They're like, whoa, it's a lot of fish. John is like, hey, it's Jesus. Peter's like, boom. Swims over there. Jesus, it's so good to see you again. And Jesus is like, if you love me, feed my sheep. But this wasn't the only meeting, you know. Remember I told you I want to meet with you guys in Galilee? See the mountain? Go to the mountain. We're going to meet up there. So they meet up on the mountain. This is in between the 40 days, somewhere in that timeline. Jesus rose from the dead, then he ascends into heaven. Somewhere in those 40 days, he takes them out of Jerusalem, back to Galilee. He's on a mountain, and on the mountain, they're up there. We find some mountain. Here we go. I need a mountain. From the mountain, you can see a further distance. He's got his disciples. Some people say this might have been where he appeared to 500. We don't really know. But this would have been a spot where he could appear to 500 at one time. He's got his followers. He's like, you see that town down on the shore? Oh yeah, that's Bethsaida. That's the fishing town where I grew up. You see the other town, Capernaum? Yeah, Jesus, that's the headquarters. That's where our fishing business was headquartered. That's where you had your home base for your ministry. That's where my mother-in-law lives and where we get some good food when we pass through that town. Jesus is like, you might have grew up there, but that isn't your end destination. He said, all authority has been given to me in heaven and earth. Therefore, go into all the world. Go into all the world and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey all that I command. Behold, I will be with you until the end of the age. he chose to give this great commission from a mountaintop where they would have been able to see their hometown, but also see some surrounding territory. And he's like, you might have grew up there, but you're not going to be comfortable there. Because I didn't just disciple you so you could go back home and be around your friends and family. But I discipled you because I'm starting a movement. And this movement's going to the whole world, to every ethnic group, every ethnos. And you know what? God has given me authority, and now I'm commissioning you to make disciples. What I just did with you for 3 years, I want you to now go do that with other people in the whole world. In the whole world. And so if you're going to make disciples, let's give you 3 quick tips, and then we got a panel discussion. Number 1, start with the end in mind. And when you have, like, say you're going to get some shoes, right? Like, these are some Air Jordans. What if I got some Air Jordans, and these were like that other dude had some shoes that he broke his ankle, Lonzo Ball. Like, Lonzo Ball shoes, you know, it's like a joke because, man, the poor guy would have been a millionaire, but his dad wanted him to start his own shoe company, and they didn't really start with the end product in mind. And now he's injured, and he may never be the superstar he could have been, because it all started with a faulty product. And see, for you to make a disciple, you need to know what you're making. If I want to make a Nike Air Jordan, guess what? It starts with a blueprint, a definition, and then there's a prototype. Before they ever put this on the assembly line, somebody says, hey, this is the prototype shoe. This is the model shoe that we're going to reproduce. So there's a blueprint. There's a model shoe, and then it goes to the factory to multiplication. But if you can't define what a disciple is, if you have a team here and you all are not on the same page of what a disciple is, and you can't define what you're trying to create, how, when you go through that finish line, are you going to even know if you did it or not? You need to know what you're trying to make, so you need to define disciple. And so what is the definition of disciple? Well, Jim Putman takes Matthew 4 and he says, the definition is in the invitation. The definition is in the invitation. So when Jesus was walking by the Sea of Galilee, he saw some guys fishing in their boats at the beginning. Before he even started discipling them, he's like, follow me and I will make you fishers of men. He's like, you're going to follow me, but I'm going to make you into something you're not. You fish for fish, but now you're going to fish for people. You are one thing. You are Simon, but I'm going to make you Peter. When Jesus was looking at them, he had a goal. He had a definition. He knew what he was making. He was making fishers of people. He was making Simons into Peter. And when you see youth, when you see students, you're not just looking at the class clown. You're looking at a future Peter. When you're working with teenagers in your youth group, you're not just looking at somebody who's like an average student. No, you're looking at somebody who can change the world. You're looking at somebody who's going to be a disciple, who follows Jesus, is being transformed by Jesus, and is on mission for Jesus. Because if they're following him, they're knowing him. If they're being made by him into something, they're being transformed by him. And if they're fishing for people, they're living on mission. And so when Jesus knew, he knew he was going to send into heaven, he was starting with the end in mind. So start with the end in mind. Second, students will rise to the level of expectations. Students will rise to the level of expectations. It's awesome, man. I have a 7th grade student that goes to school 1 block from my house. He's a 7th grader. I have to admit, I've been working for First Party now for 2 years, and I was like, I had no expectations of middle schoolers. I thought high schoolers, they can lead these clubs. Middle schoolers, they need a little more help. This 7th grader got 96 students from his school to stay after school for Bible club. And then he got up and preached the gospel better than a lot of youth pastors I've seen. And I'm like, Lord, I'm sorry for having low expectations of middle schoolers. Because this guy is living for Jesus, and he's sharing the gospel. Don't lower your expectations. I don't have the time for the video clip, but in the movie Stand and Deliver, it's worth watching. Jaime Escalante is in a school. He quit his career job, and he's teaching in LA, in the inner city, and he's like the school's about to lose its accreditation. People are quitting the job saying, hey, I just got a job at some aerospace company, and another guy's like, hey, I don't know why you have me teaching math. I'm tired to be a P coach. And they're like, hey, what are we going to do this school? We're going to lose our accreditation. And Jaime Escalante's like, I can do more. Like, what are you doing? I've been here 2 months. What are you going to? He's like, I can teach more classes. He's like, in fact, I'm going to teach these students AP calculus. And the department chair was like, no, you're not. These kids can't handle that. You're setting them up for disappointment. You're setting them up for failure. And he's like, you know what? Students will rise to the level of expectation. All we need is guidance. We just need desire. they can rise. And so, do you expect these kids to be followers of Jesus, who deny themselves, take up their cross, and follow him? Jesus didn't lower their expectations for his disciples. He's like, no, you know what? You want to be one of my disciples? Guess what? It involves self-denial. Imagine being willing to die, and it's following him. Taking up your cross, denying yourself. I remember my youth pastor took me out to McDonald's, took out all of us out to McDonald's after youth group. Sunday nights was when we met in Miami Lakes, and we went out to McDonald's, and he had like 5 of us. He's like, I have a question for you guys. Are you willing to die for Jesus? I was just a teenager, and he was putting inside of me a high expectation of what it means to be a disciple. And finally, the end we are always shooting for. The aim, what we are aiming for is a disciple-making missional movement. Disciple-making missional movement. We're looking to make a disciple. When you see a kid, you're not just making a disciple, you're making a disciple maker. You're not just making a disciple maker, you're making generations. Like Paul told Timothy, hey, what I taught you, I want you to teach the faithful people who are going to in turn teach others. And there's 4 generations: Paul, Timothy, faithful men, and others. You see, you need to be thinking like, hey, I'm not just training a disciple, I'm training a disciple maker, and I'm going 4 generations. Success for me is when I disciple somebody, disciple somebody, disciple somebody. And they can start making it disciples and do a part of discipleship even as teenagers. They can lead their friends to Christ. They can teach them how to follow Christ in the basics. They can begin. I remember when my youth pastor, I was only 16, he's like, guess what, Dwayne, you're going to be teaching a youth group. What? But he was training me, equipping me, pouring into me. He was seeing in me potential that I didn't even have. Like he was saying, he was seeing the future. He was seeing me. And so with this, disciple making, it's like I'm going to cross the finish line. I'm passing the time, right? But what's going to be beautiful is they pass the baton, they pass the baton, pass the baton. Because Jesus said, behold, I'm with you to the end of the age. This is a movement that continues till Jesus returns. And when the end in mind that I'm thinking of is I want to be in heaven, right? And it's going to be nice when Joshua Hollick, who I baptized when he was a 5th-year senior in high school, when he just got saved from selling drugs. And I got to baptize and disciple him. And it's very basic, and other people took it further than I ever did, but I had the initial up to baptism part of discipling. Then he started a Bible club in his school at Warren West High School in Berlin. He was reaching his friends. He started a small group while he was a 5th-year senior, former drug dealer. And then now he became a pastor, and he's discipled others and baptized others. And then now the people that he discipled and baptized, I don't even know who they've been discipled and baptized, because the movement, there's people that when I get to heaven at the end of the age, I'm looking forward, like my dream that I'm living for is I'm being well done, good and faithful servant. But I want somebody to come and say, hey, guess what? You know what? You're my spiritual great-grandfather. We never had a chance to meet on earth. But you discipled Josh, who discipled Tony, who discipled me. That's the end I'm aiming for. That when I'm in heaven, there's generations of disciples that I never met saying, thank you for making disciples and make disciples and make disciples.